Good evening, everyone. Before the stories begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. The more you engage, the more these chilling tales will return to your feed. Now, let's step into the dark together. When I was 24, I moved back to my hometown in Ohio after spending a few years working in Chicago. It wasn't exactly a planned move. Things in the city hadn't gone the way I thought they would. I lost my job, my relationship fell apart, and rent was becoming impossible. So I packed up what little I had and drove the 6 hours back to the same quiet town I once swore I'd never return to. The first week back, I tried convincing myself it wasn't so bad. I stayed at my parents' old house, which had been sitting empty since they relocated down to Florida. The neighborhood was the same as I remembered it. Rows of nearly identical homes, trimmed yards, and the kind of silence that made you think nobody actually lived there. I hadn't seen or spoken to many people since high school, so when I stopped into the local grocery store one night, I was caught off guard when someone called my name. At first I didn't recognize him. His face was fuller, his hair buzzed down to the skin, but his smile was immediate, wide, and familiar. It was Ryan Mercer. Back in middle school and freshman year, Ryan had been one of my closest friends. We used to ride bikes until sundown, sneak into the closed community pool, and trade burned CDs like they were treasure. But by the time we hit our late teens, we drifted apart. He got into partying. I got into trying to get out of town. I hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade. He clapped me on the shoulder like no time had passed at all. "Man, I knew it was you. I could spot that walk a mile away. What are the odds you'd be back here?" I forced a smile, not sure how I felt. "Yeah, it's been a while, just needed a reset, I guess." Ryan chuckled like he knew something I didn't. "Well, it's good to have you back. You'll see this place isn't as boring as you thought it was. Things have changed since we were kids." The way he said it left me uneasy, but I brushed it off. He insisted we grab a drink sometime, even suggested that night. I didn't really want to, but he was so insistent that saying no felt wrong. So I agreed. We met at a small dive bar off the highway, the kind of place with neon beer signs buzzing over the pool tables and only 3 people sitting at the counter. Ryan bought the first round and immediately dove into stories from our childhood, details I didn't even remember. He recalled exact dates, clothes I'd been wearing, even the jokes we told each other when we were 13. At first it was kind of funny, like flipping through a scrapbook I'd forgotten existed. But as the night went on, it started to feel wrong. He brought up things he shouldn't have remembered. My old locker combination. The time I lied to my mom and told her I was at his house when I was really meeting up with a girl at the park. He even mentioned the night I left town at 18. The exact time I'd gotten into my car to drive away. I stared at him, trying to figure out how he could know that. I never told anyone. "Small towns," Ryan said with that same wide grin. "They have a way of remembering for you." The comment gave me a chill, but he laughed it off and bought another round. I left early, telling him I was exhausted. He hugged me a little too long before I slipped out. I thought that would be the end of it. But over the next few days, I kept seeing him. At the gas station, at the diner, even parked outside my parents' house late one night. He always waved, always smiling. Then came the night I woke up to tapping on my window. I sat up in bed, frozen, listening as the sound came again. 3 light knocks against the glass. My room was on the 2nd floor. I grabbed a flashlight and went to the window. At first, I saw nothing. Then the beam caught a figure standing down in the yard just barely past the tree line. Ryan. He was staring up at me, motionless, his face pale in the light. I pulled the blinds shut, my heart hammering. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from an unknown number. The text read, "You shouldn't have left me back then. You promised we'd always be friends." I didn't remember ever making a promise like that. But Ryan clearly did. And that was just the beginning. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe it wasn't Ryan out there. Maybe it was some kid messing around and my mind filled in the blanks. But when I walked down to the mailbox, there was a folded sheet of paper stuffed into it. No envelope. Just my name scrawled across the top in messy handwriting. Inside was a single sentence. "We need to talk about that night in the woods." My stomach dropped. Because there was only one night I knew he could be talking about. When we were 14, Ryan and I used to sneak off into the wooded trails behind his house. One summer evening, we found this old concrete foundation, probably from a house that had burned down decades before. We camped there, told scary stories, and lit fires we weren't supposed to. But that one night, we weren't alone. Some drifter, or maybe just an older man, had wandered into the clearing, screaming at us for trespassing. He chased us until we lost him. I never told a soul. I figured we'd both buried that memory forever. But now Ryan was dredging it back up like it had just happened yesterday. That night I deadbolted the doors, locked the windows, and tried to sleep with the TV on. But around 2 a.m., the power went out. I sat there in the dark, pulse racing, until I heard it again. The tapping. Not at the window this time, but at the back door. Slow, deliberate, like knuckles brushing against the wood. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept down the hallway, my bare feet sticking to the hardwood. The tapping stopped before I got there. I flicked on my flashlight and shined it through the glass. Nothing, just the still backyard. I sighed in relief, until the beam caught something on the doorframe. Scratches, dozens of them, fresh and jagged, carved deep into the wood, like someone had dragged a key or knife up and down the frame over and over. I barely slept. The following morning, I called the sheriff's office. They sent a deputy out who listened, wrote everything down, and finally shrugged. "Look, Ryan Mercer's been on our radar before. Nothing we can stick to him, but he's odd. Stay clear of him. If he comes onto your property again, call us." It wasn't reassuring. That night I was half asleep when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. Grainy, dark, taken from what looked like across the street. It was me, standing in my kitchen, staring down at the knife in my hand from the night before. The message attached read, "I remember everything you don't, and I can remind you." I dropped the phone. He'd been in the yard watching me. He was keeping a record of me. I wanted to run, just get in my car and drive until I hit another state, but I couldn't shake the feeling that leaving wouldn't stop him. Ryan wasn't following me because I was convenient. He was following me because I had once been his, and in his mind, I still was. The breaking point came 3 nights later. I woke to the sound of the front door creaking open. No knocking this time, no pretense. Just the door slowly moving on its hinges. I grabbed the flashlight again and edged into the hallway. I could hear breathing. Heavy, ragged, just beyond the staircase. I whispered his name before I could stop myself. "Ryan?" The breathing paused, and then he answered from the darkness. "You left me. You left me when I needed you most." I froze, every muscle in my body screaming to run. He stepped forward into the beam of the flashlight. His face was pale, sweat-soaked, eyes wide with something between fury and grief. In his hand, he held an old photograph. One of me and him, maybe 12 years old, sitting on our bikes with our arms slung around each other. "You promised," he said again, voice breaking. I tried to keep my tone calm, even though my heart felt like it was tearing out of my chest. "Ryan, you need help. This isn't the way," he snapped. His whole body jerked as he screamed, a guttural sound that didn't even sound human. He lunged forward, the photo crumpling in his fist. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. My hand found the knife I'd left on the hallway table, and I pointed it at him. For the first time that night, he hesitated. His chest heaved as he looked from the knife to me, his expression flickering between rage and something almost childlike. Then, without a word, he bolted. Out the door, down the street, vanishing into the night. The cops combed the neighborhood for hours but never found him. They told me to stay with family until things calmed down. But I couldn't shake the last thing he said just before he ran. Words so quiet I almost thought I'd imagined them. "We'll finish this where we left off. In the woods." I moved out of that town within a week. I haven't seen Ryan since, but every time I look over my shoulder on a lonely road or hear tapping on a window late at night, I wonder if he's still watching, and if one day he'll come back to remind me of the promise I never meant to keep. When I was 19, I left my hometown in Wisconsin and told myself I'd never look back. There were too many memories there that I wanted to bury, and one in particular that I swore I'd take to the grave. That memory was tied to Lucas Drayton. Lucas was my best friend all through high school. We weren't popular, but we stuck together, skipping classes, sneaking beers from his dad's fridge, driving his rusted Chevy down back roads at night pretending we were free. But Lucas always had a darker side to him. He liked pushing things too far, liked watching people squirm. The last summer before I left, he pushed me further than I ever wanted to go. It was at Blackwater Lake. We'd been drinking by the fire when a stranger wandered up. A guy in his late 20s, scruffy, half-drunk, looking for trouble. Words turned into shoving. Shoving turned into a fight. And before I knew it, the guy wasn't moving. I remember Lucas staring down at him, breathing hard, then looking at me with a coldness I'd never seen before. "We didn't do anything," he said. "He tripped, that's all." But I knew better. And when Lucas rolled the man's body into the lake and told me to forget it ever happened, I went along because I was terrified of him. I left town 2 weeks later and never spoke to him again. That was 15 years ago. Last month, out of nowhere, I got a message on Facebook. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." It was from Lucas. Every instinct in me said to ignore it, but curiosity, or maybe guilt, made me reply. He asked to meet at a diner just outside of town. Against my better judgment, I drove up. He was already there, sitting in the corner booth. Older, gaunter, his once shaggy hair thinned to patches, but his eyes were exactly the same. Sharp, watching. "You look the same," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't bother with small talk. "Why'd you want to see me?" He leaned in across the table, lowering his voice. "Because the past doesn't stay buried forever." My stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" Lucas pulled something from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. A photo. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then it clicked. It was Blackwater Lake, the shoreline, and sticking out of the mud at the edge was something pale and unmistakably human. A hand. I shoved the photo back at him, my heart hammering. "Why the hell would you show me this?" He smiled wider. "Because they're draining the lake this month. City project. New dam going in. And when they do, well, let's just say we're both going to be very popular." I stared at him, trying to read his expression. He wasn't nervous. If anything, he seemed excited. "What do you want from me?" I asked. He tapped the photo with one finger. "I want you to remember, and I want you to help me finish what we started." I left the diner without saying another word, but his voice followed me out into the night. "You can't run this time. We made a pact." When I got home, another message was waiting in my inbox. A video file. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The screen lit up with shaky night footage, Lucas's voice whispering behind the camera. He was back at the lake. The camera panned over the dark water, then tilted down at the shoreline. There, half sunken in the mud, was a skull, and then the camera turned, pointing into the woods. "Say hi," Lucas whispered. Someone stepped into frame. It was me. Or at least, someone who looked exactly like me, standing there with that same terrified expression I remembered having all those years ago. I barely slept that night after watching the video. My mind kept replaying the last frame over and over. The figure in the woods who looked exactly like me. Same hair, same clothes I'd worn back in high school. It didn't make sense. Lucas had to be messing with me, but the unease it left in my chest felt too real. The next morning I drove by the lake just to prove to myself it was all some sick game. Sure enough, the city had posted signs. Blackwater Lake Draining Project. No trespassing. Heavy equipment lined the dirt road leading in. The water line was already lower than I remembered, thick mud swallowing the shoreline. I told myself I'd just take a look and leave. But as soon as I stepped out of the car, I heard it. My name. Whispered, stretched thin across the still air. I froze, scanning the woods. Nothing moved. The crew working there was gone for the weekend. The place was empty. Still, the whisper came again, louder this time. "You left me." My heart thudded. I spun back toward the lake. For just a split second, I saw a figure at the far end of the drained shoreline. Thin, pale, soaked in mud, staring at me. And then it sank into the water. I didn't wait. I bolted back to the car and sped away, every nerve in my body screaming. That night, Lucas called me. His number flashed across my phone, and against every instinct I answered. "You saw him, didn't you?" he said, his voice calm, almost smug. "Lucas, what the hell is going on?" There was silence on the other end for a long moment. Then he laughed quietly. "You still don't get it. We didn't bury him. We fed him. And now he wants both of us back." I hung up, panic flooding through me. I tried blocking his number, tried ignoring the messages, but they kept coming. Photos of the lake at night, recordings of footsteps sloshing through mud, and one video of Lucas himself standing waist-deep in the water, grinning at the camera as something pale and thin rose behind him. 3 days later, the sheriff's department found Lucas's truck abandoned by the lake. No sign of him. Just his jacket, folded neatly on the shore, with a photo tucked into the pocket. It was of me and Lucas when we were teenagers. But this time, there was a third figure in the background, half hidden by the trees. The same stranger we fought that night. His face grinning, distorted, his eyes locked directly on the camera. I tried convincing myself it was doctored, that Lucas had staged it all. But the sheriff said something that made my blood run cold. Funny thing is, this photo looks like it's been developed on old paper stock, like from the 90s. Same kind they don't even make anymore. I left town that night and never went back. But I keep my curtains shut because sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I hear that same whisper outside my window. "You left me." I was halfway through dinner when I looked up and saw Owen sitting across from me. He was leaning back in the booth, grinning at me with that same crooked smile he'd worn in high school, the one he always flashed right before he dared me to do something stupid. For a split second, I almost smiled back, instinct kicking in like I was 17 again. But then reality hit. Owen was dead. He'd drowned the summer after graduation. I'd gone to his funeral. I'd carried his casket. I had stood by his parents while they wept over the closed lid. There was no mistaking it. Owen had been gone for 15 years. Yet here he was, tapping the table with his fingers, like he'd been waiting for me the whole time. "Took you long enough," he said, his voice scratchy, older but still undeniably his. "You look different, but yeah, it's you." My fork slipped from my hand and clattered onto the plate. The waitress passed by without even glancing in our direction. Nobody else seemed to notice him. Not the couple behind me, not the guy at the counter. Just me. "You can't be here," I whispered. Owen tilted his head, squinting at me like I'd just said something dumb. "Don't you remember? We're supposed to finish what we started. By the quarry. That night." My stomach lurched. I did remember, at least in fragments, the last night we ever hung out. We'd been drinking, daring each other, cutting across the woods near Black Hollow Quarry. Something happened. He got too close to the edge. Then he was gone. They told everyone he slipped. But there were gaps in my memory, holes that I never dared to fill in. I pushed back from the booth, but before I could stand, Owen reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. His skin was clammy and ice cold, colder than any living person should ever be. "You don't get to walk away," he said. His voice was soft now, almost kind, but his grip tightened until I winced. "Not again." I yanked my hand back, knocking over my drink. The waitress finally looked over, muttering something about clumsy customers, but she didn't see Owen. She looked right past him. I stood and stumbled out of the diner, heart thundering in my chest. Through the glass window I saw him still sitting there, smiling at me, as if he had all the time in the world. I drove home fast, trying to convince myself it was exhaustion, maybe some breakdown from stress. But when I stepped inside, the lie crumbled. There were muddy footprints across the kitchen floor, 2 plates set on the table, and a beer, his favorite brand, that I hadn't bought in over a decade, sitting open and sweating on the counter. I locked every door and window, then sat on the couch with my head in my hands. My phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. My blood went cold as I read it. "You promised you wouldn't let me go in alone." I dropped the phone, my mind racing back to that night. The quarry. The dares. Him stepping closer to the edge, shouting back at me to follow. I'd frozen, told him I couldn't. He laughed, turned around, and then he fell. The guilt I'd buried for years came roaring back. The phone buzzed again. This time it was a video. I hesitated, then pressed play. The screen filled with shaky footage of the woods, night vision casting everything in green. The camera panned to the quarry's edge. Standing there, with his back turned, was Owen. He turned toward the camera, his face pale, dripping water, his smile too wide. "You left me," he said. "Now it's your turn." The video ended, the screen black. I nearly threw the phone across the room, but before I could move, I heard it. A sound that froze me in place. Breathing, not my own, coming from the hallway just beyond the kitchen. I forced myself to turn my head. The hallway was dark, but at the far end, near my bedroom door, there was a figure, just standing there, barely lit by the streetlight filtering through the blinds. "Owen?" I whispered, though I already knew. The figure stepped forward, water dripping onto the hardwood floor. His voice came low, gurgling, broken. "You don't get to eat without me." I froze in place, staring down the hallway at the figure dripping water onto the floor. Every part of me screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, mildew, and something sour, like stagnant pond water. "Owen," I whispered again, though I didn't know why. Maybe part of me still wanted this to make sense. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate, each footfall leaving behind a dark, wet print. His skin was bloated, swollen, patches of it hanging loose like it had been soaking too long. But his eyes were the same. Sharp, alive, watching me. "You left me," he said again, his voice bubbling like something was caught in his throat. "You said we'd go together. You said we'd both jump." My chest tightened. The memory slammed back into me like a fist. That night, drunk and reckless, he dared me to leap into the quarry's black water. I'd laughed it off, told him I wasn't stupid enough to dive in blind. He called me a coward, said he'd do it first. And then he did. He jumped, only he never came back up. I staggered backward toward the kitchen, fumbling for a knife in the drawer. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. "Stay back," I stammered. "This isn't real. You're not real." His grin widened, stretching unnaturally across his face. "You don't get to decide that." The lights flickered overhead, then cut out entirely. Darkness swallowed the house, leaving only the faint glow of the street lamp through the blinds. I could still hear the steady drip of water hitting the floor, closer now. In the dark, I heard him whisper right beside me, breath damp against my ear. "Eat with me." I swung the knife wildly, connecting with nothing but air. My flashlight app flicked on by accident as I fumbled with my phone, the beam cutting across the room. For an instant, I saw him, right there, inches away, his face mottled and ruined, water pouring from his mouth as though he were still drowning. Then the light blinked out. I bolted toward the front door, clawing at the locks. My fingers slipped against the deadbolt, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Just as I yanked it open, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. Ice cold. I spun, knife raised, and found myself staring at my own reflection. It wasn't a mirror. It was him. But his face was mine. The bloated, drowned version of me, smiling with Owen's crooked grin. "You let me die alone," he said in my voice. "Now it's your turn." I screamed and lunged through the door, sprinting into the night barefoot, not daring to look back. When I finally stopped, miles down the road, I called the police. They searched the house top to bottom. No footprints, no water, no extra plates on the table, not even the text messages or the video on my phone. They were gone, erased like they'd never existed. But in the days that followed, the whispers started. At night, through the vents, from the bathroom mirror, even on the other end of the phone when no one was there. Always the same words. Always Owen's voice. "You left me. I don't sleep in my house anymore. I drive from motel to motel, trying to stay one step ahead. But it doesn't matter where I go, because every time I sit down at a table, whether it's a diner, a motel breakfast nook, or just the desk in my room, there's always a second plate waiting. And sometimes when I look up, he's already sitting across from me." In my sophomore year of college, I lived off campus in a run-down 3-bedroom apartment with 2 other guys. One was Darren, a baseball player who was always out late partying. The other was Evan. At least, I think his name was Evan. He moved in a couple weeks after me, quiet, awkward, kept to himself. He was tall, pale, wore thick glasses that always slid down his nose. He had this weird habit of watching me cook, never saying a word, just standing in the doorway like he was memorizing every move I made. Then one night he was gone. I came home from class and his stuff wasn't in the room anymore. No clothes, no books, no posters on the wall. Just an empty mattress. I asked Darren where he went, and he gave me a blank look. "Who?" he said. "Evan," I told him. "Our other roommate." But Darren swore it had just been the 2 of us all semester. At first I thought he was messing with me, but it kept happening. Our neighbors didn't remember him. My girlfriend at the time swore I was imagining things. Professors looked at me like I was crazy when I asked about him in class. Eventually, I convinced myself I'd made a mistake, maybe mixed him up with someone else. I stopped bringing it up. 15 years passed. I graduated, moved states, started over. I never thought about Evan again, until last month, when someone knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was him. Evan. Same pale face, same glasses sliding down his nose, not a day older than when I last saw him. "You forgot me," he said softly. His voice was exactly the same. "But I didn't forget you." I stood there frozen, heart hammering. "That's not possible. You left. Nobody even—" He tilted his head, cutting me off. "They never remembered me. But you did. That's why I came back. We still have things to finish." I slammed the door on him, shaking, telling myself I was hallucinating. Maybe stress, maybe lack of sleep, but when I checked the peephole, he was still standing there, smiling. That night I dreamed about the old apartment. Evan was sitting on his bare mattress, whispering something I couldn't make out. When I woke up, my phone was on the nightstand recording. Somehow the voice memo app was open. And when I pressed play, I heard a low whisper. "Roommates forever." I didn't go back to sleep. The next morning, I dug through my old college photos. Most were on CDs, grainy shots from cheap cameras. I flipped through them, half expecting to see nothing. But there he was. In some, he was standing in the background. In others, he was closer. And in one photo, one I swear I had looked at a dozen times before, he was sitting right beside me on the couch, his hand resting on my shoulder. But his face was blurred, not from motion, not from bad quality. The rest of the photo was clear. Only his face was smeared like the film had rejected him. That night he came back. I woke up to the sound of my door unlocking, the knob slowly turning. I grabbed a bat and crept into the hall, but when I flicked on the light, the door was still shut. And then I noticed it. Another toothbrush in the bathroom cup, a pair of shoes by the door, and on the fridge, taped under a magnet, was a photo I hadn't seen before. Me, Darren, and Evan. All three of us smiling, arms around each other like brothers. Only I know for a fact that photo never existed. I stared at the photo on the fridge, my stomach twisting. I had no memory of it being taken. I didn't even recognize the clothes I was wearing in it. But there I was, laughing, carefree, my arm around Evan's shoulders like we'd been best friends for years. I ripped it down and tossed it into the trash. The next morning it was back. Same magnet, same spot. Only this time, Darren was missing from the picture. Just me and Evan, smiling like we'd been together all along. I didn't go to work that day. I couldn't. Every time I walked into another room, there were new signs. A coffee mug beside the sink, his jacket draped over a chair, even a copy of my apartment key hanging on the rack. Evan was moving in again. That night I tried calling Darren for the first time in years, desperate for some confirmation I wasn't losing my mind. When he picked up, his voice was hoarse with sleep. "Who is this?" he asked. "It's me, from college. We lived together, remember?" There was a pause. Then Darren sighed. "Man, I don't know what you're talking about. My only roommate back then was Evan." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? No, that's wrong. It was you and me, Evan." But Darren had already hung up. I sat in silence, shaking until I heard the floorboards creak. Slowly, I turned my head toward the hallway. Evan was standing there, pale, thin, unchanged from the boy I remembered, his glasses glinting in the dim light. "You're the only one who keeps forgetting," he said softly. "But I can help you remember. We were never apart. Not once." My throat went dry. "You're not real." He smiled and stepped closer. "Look around. Who else is here? Who else remembers you?" I glanced at the family photos I kept on the shelf. My parents, my sister, me. Only now, there he was too, standing in the background, smiling in every single one. "No," I whispered, stumbling back. He followed. His footsteps didn't make a sound. "You were never alone," he said. "You've always lived with me. You just keep trying to erase me, and that hurts." I ran into my bedroom, slammed the door, and pressed my back against it. My chest heaved, my heart pounding like it would break through my ribs. I knew I had to get out, had to escape before he swallowed me whole. But then I noticed something. The door to my room wasn't mine anymore. The posters on the wall weren't mine. The books on the shelves weren't mine. It was all different. It was all his. I turned slowly, and my stomach dropped. The room was identical to our old college apartment, the one from 15 years ago. I heard a voice behind me, calm, gentle. "Welcome home, roommate." I spun around and Evan was there, inches from my face. His features flickered, sometimes older, sometimes younger, sometimes a smear of nothing at all. He grabbed my shoulders, and for the first time I felt warmth in his skin. His grin widened. "This time," he said, "you don't get to forget." The lights went out. When I woke up, I was lying in a bunk bed, thin sheets, familiar creaks, the smell of old carpet. My stomach dropped. It was our dorm room. From sophomore year, Darren's bed was empty. Evans wasn't. He leaned over the top bunk, staring down at me with that same crooked smile. "Go back to sleep," he whispered. "We've got class tomorrow." And in that moment, the sickening truth hit me. Maybe I hadn't left college. Maybe I never graduated, never moved away, never built a life at all. Maybe I'd been here with him the whole time, forgetting, over and over, while he patiently reminded me. And if that was true, I knew I'd never leave again. Because Evan would always be my roommate. Forever. I hadn't seen Aaron McKinley in almost 20 years when he messaged me out of the blue. We'd grown up together in Indiana, living just a few blocks apart. We weren't best friends, but we played baseball on the same little league team, rode the bus together, and spent a few afternoons at each other's houses. After high school, I left for college and never looked back. His message was simple. "You should come to the reunion. Everyone's been waiting for you." At first, I thought he meant a high school reunion, but when I asked which one, he replied, "Not school. Family. You'll understand." I nearly ignored it, but curiosity gnawed at me. After a few days, I finally agreed to drive out. He sent an address in rural Ohio, nearly 3 hours from where I lived. The house was massive, a farmhouse at the end of a dirt road, 2 stories with a wraparound porch, windows glowing warm yellow against the darkening sky. There were at least a dozen cars in the gravel driveway. I hesitated, but Aaron was already waiting on the porch, grinning wide. "You came," he said, hugging me like I was a long-lost brother. Inside, the house was alive with chatter. People milled about with paper plates of food, glasses of wine, children running down the halls. But the strangest part was how everyone looked at me, smiling, nodding, whispering my name. Finally, one of the older women said, patting my arm, "We thought you'd forgotten us." Another man clapped me on the back. "Welcome home." I tried to laugh it off. "I think there's been some mistake. I'm not—" Aaron cut me off with a hand on my shoulder. "Don't be shy. They've all been waiting for this. Come on, let me show you." He led me down a hallway lined with framed photographs. My chest tightened as I looked closer. The pictures weren't of him or his family. They were of me. Me as a kid standing on a dock with a fishing pole. Me in a Halloween costume I didn't recognize. Me sitting at a dinner table surrounded by strangers who were now smiling at me in the hallway. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. Aaron just smiled. "Proof. You've always been one of us." I shook my head, backing away. "No. I grew up in Indiana. My parents are alive. I have a sister. This isn't real." But everywhere I turned, the walls told a different story. More photos, more evidence of a life I'd never lived. And when I finally pulled out my phone to show a picture of my real family, my stomach dropped. Every photo in my gallery was different. Vacations I never took. Holidays spent in that very house. And in every single one, Aaron and his family were there with me. I stumbled into the kitchen, desperate for air. That's when I noticed the family tree framed above the counter. My name was etched onto one of the branches. Underneath it, in neat handwriting, were the words, "Return to us, October 2025. My hands shook as I turned to Aaron. "Why are you doing this to me?" His expression softened, almost sad. "Because you forgot, and forgetting is dangerous. You're part of us whether you want it or not. We can't let you walk away again." The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching me now, their smiles gone, their eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. A little girl tugged on my sleeve. When I looked down, she whispered, "Don't run. They'll only bring you back." I staggered toward the front door, but before I reached it, Aaron's voice echoed through the hall. "You'll understand after dinner. We saved your seat." And when I looked back, I saw the dining room table. Every chair filled, every plate set, and at the head of the table a chair sat waiting, with my name carved into the wood. I froze at the sight of that chair. My name, carved deep into the wood, like it had been waiting for years. The room had gone silent. Every face turned toward me. Their eyes weren't kind anymore. They weren't even curious. They were expectant. Aaron stepped forward, resting a hand on the back of the chair. "Sit," he said gently. "You're home now." My chest tightened. "I'm not. This isn't my family." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The older woman who'd first greeted me shook her head. "Still confused?" she said softly. "It happens after they've been gone so long." A man with a thick beard leaned forward from the table. "But they always remember once they eat." Something inside me screamed to run, but my legs felt rooted to the floor. Aaron guided me into the chair before I could resist. The wood was ice cold, and I could feel the grooves of my name under my palms. The meal began without a word. Bowls and platters were passed around, piled high with food. Roast meats, steaming vegetables, bread that smelled freshly baked. Everyone dug in, smiling and nodding at one another. The only plate untouched was mine. Aaron placed a steaming slice of meat onto it and pushed it toward me. "Go on," he urged. "You'll remember once you taste it." The smell hit me first. Metallic, sour, wrong. I looked down and realized the meat wasn't beef or pork. It was darker, stringier. Something in me recoiled before my mind caught up. I whispered, "What is this?" Aaron smiled. "Home." The little girl who had warned me before was staring at me again, wide-eyed, shaking her head so subtly I almost missed it. "Don't eat." Her lips formed silently. "Don't." My hand trembled as I set the fork down. "I can't do this," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't belong here." The entire table went still. Dozens of eyes locked on me, their smiles fading into something sharper. Aaron sighed. "You do belong. You always have. You left once before, but we brought you back. And if you run again, we'll keep bringing you back until you understand." I shoved the chair back and stumbled toward the front door. Someone grabbed my arm, but I tore free, sprinting down the hall and into the night. Gravel crunched under my feet as I reached my car, fumbling for the keys. But when I opened the driver's door, I froze. A photo was taped to the steering wheel. Me sitting at that dinner table, smiling. A plate of that same meat half-eaten in front of me. I gagged and stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. I hadn't taken a bite. I knew I hadn't. The porch light snapped on, illuminating Aaron standing at the top of the steps. He didn't look angry. He looked patient. "You can run if you want," he called into the night. "But where will you go? Check your pictures. Check your memories. We're in all of them now. You've always been ours." I didn't think. I just drove. Gravel spitting behind me, headlights cutting through the darkness. I drove until the farmhouse was miles away, until the road curved into familiar streets again. When I finally stumbled into my apartment shaking, I collapsed on the couch. I needed to prove to myself it was all some elaborate trick. I pulled up my phone, scrolling through my photos. Every single one had changed. Birthdays, graduations, vacations, all of them included Aaron and his family, smiling, waving, always there. And then I reached the most recent photo. It was me, sitting at that long table in the farmhouse, my name carved into the chair, the meat half-eaten on my plate. Behind me, Aaron's hand rested on my shoulder. I dropped the phone, heart pounding, and looked up toward the kitchen. Another place setting had been laid out on my table. A plate, a fork, and a steaming slice of meat I hadn't cooked. And as I stared, I swear I heard Aaron's voice behind me, low and steady. "Welcome home." When the letter arrived, I thought it was a scam. Some legal firm in West Virginia claiming an old friend had passed away and left me their estate. I hadn't spoken to Matthew Hale in nearly 20 years. We'd been inseparable in middle school, but by the time we hit high school, he'd grown strange, withdrawn, obsessed with things I didn't understand. We drifted apart, and after graduation, I moved away. The letter said he'd died unexpectedly, no details given, and had named me as the sole heir to his property. At first I laughed it off, but the documents were real. The deed, the signatures, the court stamp. Against my better judgment, curiosity pulled me there. The house was 2 stories, tucked into the hills off a winding road. It looked older than I remembered him living in, its siding weathered gray, the porch sagging. The key fit perfectly, though. Inside, it smelled like dust and rot, but something else too. Something familiar. I stepped into the living room and froze. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a framed photo of me. Not us, just me. Smiling in my graduation gown. A photo I knew for a fact had hung in my parents' house. I'd never given Matthew a copy. I moved deeper into the house. Every room was the same. Objects that belonged to me, from different parts of my life, placed carefully as though they'd always been there. A baseball glove from Little League, my old Walkman, even a sweater I'd lost in college. It was impossible. In one upstairs bedroom, I found a desk stacked with journals, my name written on every spine. Heart pounding, I opened one. The handwriting inside was mine, not similar. Mine. The entries detailed summers I'd spent with Matthew, road trips we'd never taken, conversations I couldn't remember. Entire years that didn't exist in my memory, written down as though I had lived them. The deeper I went, the worse it got. A room filled with boxes labeled by year, each one crammed with photos. Me and Matthew as kids, teenagers, adults. In places I'd never been, wearing clothes I didn't own. In one photo, we stood in front of this very house holding up a welcome home sign. My stomach turned. In the kitchen, taped to the refrigerator, was a newspaper clipping. Obituary section. It was my name. I staggered back, hands trembling. The print said I had died in 2005. That Matthew had been the one to identify the body. That I had no family left. No surviving relatives. Just him. I ripped it down, but there were more. Copies taped inside the pantry, framed on the wall, folded neatly in the drawers. I wanted to run, but something drew me down into the basement. The stairs groaned under my weight, the air thick with mildew. At the bottom, a single bulb swung on a cord, casting shadows across the cement walls. Against the far wall were shelves filled with more of my belongings. Childhood toys, my varsity jacket, a box of birthday cards all signed with my parents' names, cards I'd never received. And then I saw it. In the center of the room stood a bed, and on that bed, lying perfectly still, was Matthew. He wasn't rotting, he wasn't decomposed. He looked exactly as he had the last time I saw him, lanky frame, pale skin, that same unsettling half-smile. His chest didn't rise or fall. His eyes were closed. But on the nightstand beside him sat a photo frame, a picture of the two of us, arms around each other, smiling. And beneath it, etched into the wood of the nightstand, were the words, "He finally came home." I stood frozen at the bottom of the basement stairs, staring at Matthew's body. His skin was pale, but not decayed. He looked preserved, like he'd been sleeping all this time. The silence pressed against my ears. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. His chest rose, shallow, slow, but unmistakable. He was breathing. "Matthew," I whispered. His eyes opened, cloudy, unfocused, then sharp. His lips curled into that same half-smile I remembered. "You made it," he rasped. His voice was dry, brittle, but steady. "I knew you'd come home." My legs nearly gave out. "You're supposed to be dead." He chuckled weakly. "I was, until you got here." The bulb overhead flickered, shadows crawling along the walls. I glanced around, desperate for something to ground me, but the shelves just mocked me with more of my life. Photos of birthdays, awards I'd never won, even letters written in my handwriting to him, signed with my name. "This isn't real," I muttered. "None of this is real." Matthew sat up, bones cracking as though his body hadn't moved in years. It's as real as you let it be. I kept it all for you. Everything you lost, everything you should have had. You don't understand, do you? You died. You died back then. I'm the only reason you're still here. I shook my head violently. I didn't die. I have a life, a job, a family. He cut me off with a laugh, hollow and sharp. Show me. I fumbled for my phone, pulling up my photos, my sister, my parents, vacations, but my stomach dropped as I scrolled. The images warped as I stared, reshaping before my eyes. Their faces blurred, fading, until Matthew stood beside me in every single one, sometimes smiling, sometimes with his arm around me. I dropped the phone. Matthew swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood. His movements were stiff, unnatural, like a puppet learning to walk, but his eyes never left mine. I built this house for you, he said, so you'd never leave again. Every piece of you, every memory is here, where it belongs. You don't need them. You just need me. The walls seemed to pulse, the shelves groaning under the weight of objects that weren't mine but were now being forced into my memory. My head throbbed. I could almost remember the vacations with him, the birthdays he attended, the nights in this very house. No, I whispered, clutching my temples. Stop. He stepped closer, his smile stretching too wide. Don't fight it. It hurts less if you don't fight. My vision blurred. The basement swam. I tried to stagger toward the stairs, but my legs buckled. Matthew caught me, his icy hands wrapping around my arms. He pulled me close, whispering in my ear, "You never had a life without me. You only dreamed you did. But dreams end. And friends are forever." The room tilted. I felt myself being lowered onto the bed. The sheets were damp, cold, smelling of earth and mildew. My eyes flicked to the nightstand. A new photo had appeared in the frame. Me, lying on this very bed, my eyes closed, Matthew smiling above me. I tried to scream, but no sound came. My chest felt heavy, my breaths shallow. I couldn't tell if it was him pressing down on me or the weight of the house itself. The last thing I saw before the bulb flickered out was Matthew's face inches from mine, his cloudy eyes gleaming. "Sleep," he whispered. "When you wake up, this will all feel normal. You'll remember you've always lived here, with me." Darkness swallowed me whole. When I opened my eyes, sunlight streamed through the curtains. The house smelled of coffee and bacon. I sat up in bed, not damp, not cold. The sheets were warm, clean. On the dresser, framed photographs of me and Matthew lined the surface. From the kitchen, his voice called cheerfully, "Breakfast is ready, roommate." And in that moment, I knew the truth. I had never left this house, and I never would. When I think back to my childhood, there's one kid who stands out more than anyone else. Jonah Walker. We were inseparable between the ages of 8 and 12. We'd ride bikes until the streetlights came on, build forts in the woods, trade comic books and baseball cards. But Jonah was different. While the rest of us collected toys or played video games, he collected darker things. Dead insects, pinned to cardboard, a shoebox full of bird skulls, even a raccoon paw he'd dried out in his garage, showing it off like some kind of prize. Looking back, I think he was obsessed with death even then. He talked about it more than any kid should, asking questions about coffins, funerals, what it felt like to be buried. We all thought it was creepy, but I was too young to understand just how unsettling it really was. By high school, Jonah had gotten stranger. We drifted apart. I hung out with different people, got into sports and part-time jobs. He stayed quiet, avoided eye contact, sat in the back of class. After graduation, I never saw him again. Honestly, I didn't expect to. That was nearly 20 years ago. So when I pulled into my driveway last month and saw someone sitting on my porch steps at midnight, My first instinct was to call the cops. He was thin, pale, his hood pulled low. He didn't move when my headlights hit him. I almost put the car back in reverse, until he looked up. "Hey," he said. His smile was faint, crooked. "It's me." It took me a moment, but my stomach dropped. Jonah. And here's the part that rattled me the most. He hadn't aged. Not a wrinkle, not a gray hair. He looked exactly like the boy I remembered from school, frozen in time. I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel. "Jonah, what the hell are you doing here?" He stood slowly, brushing dirt from his hands. His voice was soft, but steady. "Had to check on you. See how you've been holding up." My pulse quickened. Holding up from what? He tilted his head, his smile widening just slightly. "From dying." My chest tightened. Very funny. But his face didn't change. "You don't remember, do you? You were supposed to stay buried. But I dug you up." Every muscle in my body went cold. I forced a laugh, trying to shake it off. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jonah stepped closer to the car, studying me with those hollow eyes. "Back in the woods. That night after your accident. They all thought you were gone. But I couldn't let that happen. I pulled you out. Breathed you back. You're only here because of me." I shook my head violently. "That never happened. I've never—" He leaned closer, his breath fogging the window. "Check your chest." Against my will, my hand pressed against my shirt, sliding down over my sternum. My fingers froze on a scar I'd never noticed before. Thin, jagged, running across my skin like something had been cut open and sewn shut. My heart pounded in my throat. Jonah smiled, stepping back into the shadows. "I told you, you don't remember, but you will." And before I could say anything else, he was gone. Just gone. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I felt dirt pressing against my face, clogging my throat. I woke up gasping, clawing at my sheets like I was trying to dig myself free. The next morning, I convinced myself it was stress, lack of sleep, maybe some cruel prank, until I went outside and found something on the porch, a weathered hospital wristband. My name was printed across it. The date? October 15th, 2004. And under status, in faded ink, one word, deceased. I stumbled back, nearly dropping it. My hands shook as I turned it over. Inside the lining, written in black marker, were the words, "Property of Jonah Walker." I wanted to throw up. The rest of the day I couldn't focus on anything. At work, people asked if I was okay. I nodded, forcing a smile, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. That night, when I got home, I searched through old boxes in my closet, yearbooks, photo albums, scrapbooks, and that's when I noticed something I'd never seen before. In one of the photo albums from my teenage years, there was a page I swear hadn't been there before. Photos of me, Jonah, and a group of kids. Except these weren't real memories. One showed me lying in a hospital bed, pale and still. Jonah sitting beside me, smiling at the camera. Another showed the two of us standing in the woods at night, dirt smeared across my face, Jonah's hand gripping my arm like he was pulling me out of the ground. I flipped the pages frantically, my breath catching in my chest, each picture worse than the last. And then the final one, a headstone, my name carved into it. The date, October 15th, 2004. My blood went ice cold. I slammed the album shut, heart hammering. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard footsteps outside my bedroom window. Slow, steady, crunching in the dirt. I told myself it was just the wind, just my imagination. But then I heard it. A whisper. "Remember." I yanked the curtains open. Jonah stood in the yard, half in shadow, his face pale in the moonlight. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just pointed toward the woods, and then he was gone. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Jonah's pale figure standing in my yard, pointing toward the woods, replayed in my head until the sun came up. By morning, I had convinced myself I wouldn't go, that I wasn't going to let him drag me back into whatever twisted game this was. But by nightfall, something pulled me there anyway. The woods behind my neighborhood hadn't changed much in 20 years. The same crooked trails, the same thick canopy that blocked out the stars. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, bouncing off tree trunks. "Jonah!" I shouted. My voice cracked, carrying too far. "If this is some sick joke, it's not funny." No answer. I pressed on. The air grew damp, heavy with the smell of soil and rot. And then I saw it. A clearing I half recognized, the ground uneven, mounded in places. My chest tightened. At the center stood Jonah. His hoodie was gone. His shirt clung to his thin frame and his skin looked almost translucent under the flashlight beam. He smiled as if he'd been waiting for me. "Took you long enough," he said. His voice echoed strangely, like it wasn't just him speaking. I raised the light, my hands trembling. "What do you want from me?" He tilted his head. "Not want. Oh. You owe me." "What are you talking about?" Jonah crouched, running his fingers across the dirt. My stomach dropped as he traced the outline of something beneath the soil. A rectangle. A grave. "Here," he whispered. "This is where you went in." You stopped breathing. Your eyes went glassy. Everyone thought you were gone, but I couldn't let them put you away. I pulled you out. I gave you back. My knees went weak. That never happened. His eyes glinted. Then explain the scar. I staggered back, shaking my head. My flashlight beam swung wildly and caught something else in the dirt. A stone marker half buried. I brushed the soil away with trembling hands. It was my name, my birth date, and the same date etched into the hospital wristband, October 15th, 2004. The earth tilted beneath me. "No, this isn't real." Jonah stepped closer, crouching beside me. "You were supposed to stay here. You weren't strong enough. You belong in the ground, but I wouldn't let you. I dug until my hands bled. I pulled you up. And now," his voice cracked into something lower, something that didn't sound human. "Now it's time to put you back." The ground trembled beneath us. Dirt shifted, opening like something alive. I stumbled back, my feet sinking into loose soil. The air grew cold, heavy, tasting like iron. Hands clawed up from the dirt, pale, skeletal, grasping at my legs, pulling me down. My flashlight fell, beam spinning across Jonah's face. Only it wasn't Jonah anymore. His skin sagged, eyes clouded, lips torn, as if he'd been buried too. "You were never alive," he rasped. "You were mine. I brought you back. And now I'm taking you with me." I screamed, kicking, tearing free from the grasping hands. I bolted toward the trees, branches whipping across my face. Behind me, I heard the earth collapse, Jonah's laughter echoing like it was inside my skull. I didn't stop running until I saw my house again, lights glowing faint in the distance. I slammed the door shut, locked it, collapsed against it, gasping. For hours, I sat there in silence, waiting, listening. When dawn broke, I convinced myself it was a nightmare. Stress, exhaustion, buried childhood memories bleeding into hallucination. I told myself I imagined the scar, the wristband, the grave. But then I went into the kitchen. On the counter sat a photo, one I'd never seen before. It was me, lying in a coffin, eyes closed, hands folded neatly across my chest. And beside me, grinning in the frame, was Jonah. On the back of the photo, in black marker, were 4 words that made my blood run cold. "I'll dig again soon." When I moved back to my hometown last year, I told myself it would only be temporary. A new job had opened up nearby and the rent was cheap. So I figured it was a good way to save some money until I figured out where I really wanted to live. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. Same old streets, same sagging power lines, same cracked sidewalks. A little older, maybe a little quieter. My new place was a modest 2-bedroom on the corner, just across from the house where the Barnes family used to live. I remembered spending afternoons in their yard with their son, Kyle. Kyle had been one of my closest friends back in elementary school, before his family suddenly moved away. I never heard from him after that. No phone calls, no social media, nothing. It was like he vanished off the map. The first night in my new house, I stepped outside to smoke on the porch. The street was still, the only sound the hum of crickets. And that's when I saw him. A figure standing perfectly still in the front yard across the street. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, or maybe a trick of the shadows. But when my eyes adjusted, my stomach dropped. It was Kyle, not the grown-up version I expected. He looked the same age as the day I last saw him, maybe 12 years old. His hair the same, his posture the same. His eyes fixed directly on me. I froze, cigarette burning between my fingers. After a long minute, I forced a wave and called out, "Kyle?" He didn't answer. He didn't move. I blinked, and in that second, he was gone. I tried to shake it off as exhaustion. Moving had worn me out, and my mind was probably just dredging up old memories. But the next night, he was there again. Same spot, same posture, staring across the street at me. This time, I called out louder. "Kyle, that you?" Silence. I crossed halfway down my yard before I lost my nerve. By the time I stepped off the curb, the yard was empty. No one. By the third night, it wasn't just unsettling. It was disturbing. I knew what I was seeing, and I couldn't explain it. He was always there at the same time, always staring and always gone the moment I tried to approach. I started asking around casually, trying not to sound insane. At the grocery store, I mentioned the house across the street to the cashier. She gave me a strange look and said it had been abandoned for over a decade. That night, I couldn't help myself. I grabbed a flashlight and crossed the street. Up close, the house was worse than I remembered. Paint peeling from the siding, the porch warped and splintered, windows coated in grime. The front door hung slightly open, the darkness inside thick and heavy. I told myself I'd just peek in, prove to myself it was empty. But when I stepped inside, the smell of dust and rot hit me hard. My flashlight beam cut across the living room, and my stomach twisted. It was my living room. The same couch, the same rug, the same photos hanging on the wall. Everything exactly as it was across the street in my own house. For a long moment I couldn't breathe. My brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe someone had copied my furniture. Maybe this was some elaborate prank. Then I noticed the photos. They weren't just similar. They were the exact same pictures I had on my wall, but with one difference. In every photo, Kyle was there. Family barbecues, birthdays, graduations, all the memories of my life, but with him standing beside me, smiling like he'd always been there. The sound of the front door creaking shut behind me made my blood run cold. I spun around. Someone was standing in the doorway. Not Kyle as a boy, Kyle as a man, my age now, same face, same build, same eyes, but he was grinning at me like we'd never been apart. "Finally," he said. His voice was calm, familiar, too close. "You came home." My body locked up. The man in the doorway, Kyle, grown up, same age as me, just stood there smiling like he'd been waiting 20 years for this moment. I raised my flashlight, my voice shaking. This isn't real. You're not real." He stepped forward, unfazed. "Not real. I've been here the whole time, watching, waiting for you to come back." The beam of light trembled across his face. His eyes didn't reflect it the way they should have. They seemed bottomless, absorbing it instead of catching it. I stumbled back, bumping into the couch, the same couch I had at home, except the fabric was torn, the cushions sagging, like it had been sitting here for years longer than mine. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. Kyle's grin widened. Nothing you didn't already give me. Your house, your life, your place. He gestured at the photos on the wall. I've been part of it all along. You just forgot. I shook my head violently. No, I grew up without you. You moved away. You disappeared. He tilted his head, studying me. Disappeared? He laughed softly. You're the one who disappeared. I stayed. I kept the life we were supposed to share. Now it's time you stayed too. The air in the house grew heavier. My chest tightened, every breath harder than the last. I glanced at the door behind him, but before I could move, I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. Someone else was in the house. The ceiling creaked. The steps grew louder, closer to the stairs. My throat went dry as I realized what I was hearing. Not one set of footsteps. Multiple. My flashlight beam shook as I turned toward the staircase, and my stomach dropped. Figures were descending, one after another. They were all me, copies of myself at different ages, 10 years old, 15, 18, each one pale, stiff, their eyes locked on me. They moved in perfect rhythm, step after step until they reached the bottom and stood in a line. Kyle stepped between them, resting a hand on the shoulder of the youngest version of me. See? You've always belonged here. Every version of you, every age, every memory. I backed against the wall, my heartbeat slamming in my ears. This isn't possible. Kyle's smile never faltered. It's already done. The house across the street? That was just a copy. A waiting room. This. He spread his arms wide, grinning. This is home. The other versions of me moved closer, their faces expressionless, their eyes hollow. My flashlight flickered, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room. I scrambled for the door, but hands, cold, identical to mine, grabbed my arms, my legs, pulling me back. I thrashed, screamed, but their grip was unyielding. Through the dark, Kyle's voice cut sharp and clear. You don't need to fight. You're not losing anything. You're just letting me finish what we started. The weight of the hands dragged me down onto the couch, pressing me into the sagging cushions. My chest burned, every breath shallow. I tried to scream again, but the sound choked in my throat as something cold pressed against my lips. A hand, my own hand, one of them forcing silence. The last thing I saw before my vision blurred was Kyle leaning over me, his face inches from mine, his smile stretching wider than should have been possible. Goodbye across the street, he whispered. Hello forever. Darkness consumed everything. When I woke up, sunlight streamed through the windows. My living room, my couch, my photos, everything exactly where it should be. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it all. A nightmare. Nothing more. But then I looked across the street. Through the window of the abandoned house, I saw movement. Another me. Standing in the living room, smiling. And beside him, Kyle. They both raised their hands in unison, waving slowly. And in that instant, I realized the truth. I hadn't walked out of that house. I was still inside it.